Mr. Navarro, Tom Dempsey with News Nation. Can we get some reaction to you about this PPI index?
Hang on. I've got a mission here. What I want to talk about at some length is the pharmaceutical executive order that was signed yesterday by President Trump. After I get through that, happy to take any questions on that, and then happy to talk a little bit about the PPI. So let's stay focused on Big Pharma. The reality here, the top line is that Americans' medicine cabinets can't be dependent on foreign imports. We know that there's big supply chain resilience issues there. And so what this executive order yesterday does is address this problem in three different ways. The top line here is we're creating a strategic advanced pharmaceutical ingredient reserve. We're number one. Number two, we are trying to stabilize long-term demand through long-term contracts from the government, which is the biggest buyer of pharmaceuticals. And three, the broader issue of regulatory reform, we are going to make it much easier for advanced manufacturing, continuous manufacturing to occur here and make us competitive. So that's kind of the thrust of the EO. Now, here's the backstory for the American people. You have a process which goes in three stages. You have precursor chemicals, which are then turned into what's called advanced pharmaceutical ingredients. And these advanced pharmaceutical ingredients are then mixed and made into the finished dosage form of the medicines that you get, liquids, tablets, capsules, and everything in between. And historically, what we've had is a problem where, because of the dumping and unfair trade practices of foreign countries, we have not been good at the precursor chemicals or the API. In other words, the first two stages of the three stages that we need. As a practical matter, about 60% of our API is made in China and India gets most of its precursor chemicals from China. So that's the textbook definition of strategic vulnerability. I encountered this in the first term with President Trump during the pandemic. I was what was called the Defense Production Act policy coordinator. It was my role to go out and get as quickly as possible the kind of PPE we needed. I had companies like Abbott come to me and say in order to make their test kits for the virus, they needed certain chemical reagents. I had to get that. And we learned after China threatened to drown us in a sea of coronavirus that we had significant vulnerabilities. The president signed an order, which I urge you to look at, from the first term. It was drafted in my office, the Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy, in that first term, that basically started us down the path we're on now today of mapping out all the critical medicines and things we need in order to keep Americans healthy. But when Biden took over, they let that ball drop, and we are in a situation now where we have to secure our pharmaceutical supply chain. So we take a three-pronged approach to this. Follow me closely here. Creating this strategic API reserve, the SAPR, right? We are going to do that. We're going to need a little extra help from Congress, which we're encouraging them to help fund this. Generically, we have no pun intended there, we have a problem where we need all sorts of stockpiles, whether critical minerals, pharmaceuticals, whatever, and for whatever reason, the agencies don't get that. But we need to have that with 6 months of reserves. We need to be able to rotate stocks so everything stays fresh. So we're going to get that done. Secondly, as I spoke a little earlier, when foreigners dump products into our market, it makes it uneconomic for our domestic manufacturers to exist. And it's predatory pricing, particularly on the part of China. They have actually identified sectors like pharmaceuticals. They want us out of business here so that they can have their way with us and the world, essentially. So the way we're going to address that is to have the country's largest group of medicine buyers, which is the federal government, in the form of Health and Human Services, Veterans Administration, and Department of Defense. They'll be issuing long-term, multi-year contracts for these critical medicines that we need, so that producers have assurances that if they make the kind of investments that need to be made, that they will be rewarded with demand from the government. So that will stabilize that. And third, again, during the first term, I got fairly active, good pun there, fairly active in advanced manufacturing for active pharmaceutical ingredients. And we were able to stand up some plants and get that moving along. But as always, one of the problems we have here in America when we try to meet our needs is that there's regulatory problems and delays, and we just have to get that stuff out of the way. So we're going to hit this with a three-pronged approach. Now, as I'm speaking, the Department of Commerce is also working on a Section 232 action on pharmaceuticals. And if, as is almost certain to be the case, the Department of Commerce finds that the flood of imports of pharmaceuticals into this country are indeed a national security threat, there will be tariffs. So today's EO coupled with tariffs will provide everything the private sector needs in order to bring home our pharmaceutical manufacturing. So this is a good day for America. America first, America pharmacies first, and that's where we're at. So I'll stop there and take some questions.
Peter Navarro, deputy at News Nation, discussed the trade relationship between China and the U.S., focusing on recent actions to strengthen America's pharmaceutical supply chain. He highlighted President Trump's executive order, which aims to reduce U.S. dependence on foreign imports and address vulnerabilities in the supply chain. The executive order takes a three-pronged approach. First, it establishes a strategic reserve of advanced pharmaceutical ingredients, API, to ensure the availability of critical medicines. Second, it stabilizes long-term demand for domestic manufacturers through multi-year contracts with federal agencies, including Health and Human Services, the Veterans Administration, and the Department of Defense. Third, it streamlines regulatory processes to facilitate advanced manufacturing and improve the competitiveness of U.S. pharmaceutical production. Navarro explained that the pharmaceutical production process has three main stages: precursor chemicals, advanced pharmaceutical ingredients, and finished dosage forms such as tablets, capsules, and liquids. Historically, the U.S. has relied heavily on China and India for the first two stages, with about 60% of APIs sourced from these countries. This dependence exposes the nation to strategic vulnerabilities, particularly during crises like the COVID-19 pandemic. Reflecting on his experience during Trump's first term as Defense Production Act Coordinator, Navarro noted that securing supplies of essential chemicals and materials revealed weaknesses in the domestic supply chain. He also criticized predatory pricing and product dumping by foreign competitors, especially China, which have made it uneconomical for U.S. manufacturers to operate. To counter these challenges, the executive order includes measures to create reserves, provide guaranteed government demand through long-term contracts, and remove regulatory obstacles that hinder domestic production. Additionally, the Department of Commerce is evaluating whether the influx of pharmaceutical imports constitutes a national security threat, potentially leading to tariffs under Section 232. Navarro concluded that the combination of this executive order and potential tariffs provides the private sector with the tools needed to strengthen domestic pharmaceutical manufacturing. He emphasized that these steps represent a significant move toward securing America's healthcare supply chain and ensuring independence from foreign reliance.